Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Wilson Center on, I guess, what is a very cold day. I haven't been out since this morning. Hello. But welcome to this event that we have, Diverse Boots on the Ground, EU and NATO Effectiveness. We're thrilled to have you. I'm Gwen Young, the director of the Global Women's Leadership Initiative and the Women in Public Service Project at the Wilson Center. And our mission is broadly to promote and ensure there are more women leaders at every decision-making table across the globe, which includes the EU and NATO, the Naval Academy, the German Marshall Fund and WIIS, and other places. But it's also to talk about the great women that are leading policy change, leading the analysis of how to get more women, and talking about key policy issues such as effectiveness. So we are going to have a really great event today, and after the event you will get the policy brief that has been prepared. And we are going to first have a presentation from Laura Groenendaal, who's the program assistant at the Europe program at the German Marshall Fund in Brussels, and Gale Mattox, who's a professor of political science in the political science department at the U.S. Naval Academy, a scholar and a global fellow for the Wilson Center. So Gale, we're happy to have you back. We will follow that by a quick moderated Q&A, and then I'm going to turn it over to you to be able to take a deeper dive on some of the issues that were raised in this policy brief and what we're looking at in terms of military effectiveness, both internally and externally within the EU, NATO, and the member nation military forces. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gale Mattox to start us off. Gale, welcome to the podium.
Thank you. Greetings. It's great to be here, be back. I was here 2 years ago as a fellow for a year, and it was terrific. Highly recommended. I want to just start by thanking Gwen for putting this all together. I think it's a discussion that we really need to have. And to GMF, where I sat in Brussels last year for a summer, and Laura and I worked on this together with Corinna, Hoerst, and also to Women in International Security. So all three have been tremendous in supporting the effort to do this event. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. So anyway, thanks to the Coast, thanks to the individuals who helped to do this. And before I speak more directly to my part of the discussion that is on NATO, let me lay out the main takeaway from the research, and that is that EU and NATO are facing similar obstacles and challenges to increasing the number of women in the leadership roles and in operations, and to raising awareness of the significance of women to overall organizational mission and, importantly, to organizational and operational effectiveness. Given the nature of NATO's mission and the EU mission in its common security and defense policy, operational effectiveness, I think, is both in the short and in the long term an extremely important objective and factor for the two organizations to demonstrate their commitment and the ability to achieve the women, peace, and security agenda, and to be recognized as contributing agents for peace and security in decision-making as well as on the ground in missions and operations. To this end, we have three major recommendations at the end, and those are political attention, political pressure and accountability, and stronger follow-through implementation. And Laura will address those at the conclusion of our presentation. From the time of the adoption of the U.S. Security Council Resolution 1325, NATO has stepped up and indicated its support for the WPS agenda in 2007. Maybe not right away, vocally, but certainly has been working on its own way in which it will approach the 1325. And it's done that through policy declarations, it's done that through summit communiques, it's done that through a variety of policy reports. Gender advisors were sent into military operations, but as with all organizations, its full conceptualization and implementation have taken time and have needed much effort. It's not an organization that normally thinks of itself in the way in which 1325 conceptualized. Two things have stood out institutionally and conceptually. First, and politically, NATO's commitment to reach its WPS objectives at the highest leadership levels has included its Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council members. And I think that's really quite a strong point for NATO. It's not something that the EU has done, and I think that it's quite a strong point. And NATO should be commended in doing that. They are looked at to also hold up the objectives of the 1325 agenda. Second, and militarily, NATO's articulation of the importance and the assignment of gender advisors in all major commands, together with encouragement for the participation of women through national forces of all members and partners in NATO headquarters and on ground ops has taken place. There's a third area that NATO's also made its name, and that is in future research that it's laid out on sexual violence and protection of children. That, however, we have at this point not really looked at. We put that particular research aside for right now. Let me begin with the political and its emphasis on leadership. The Secretary General has for over 5 years appointed a special envoy to be a high-level focal point on all aspects of NATO's contributions to the WPS agenda, and he's given that envoy a senior position on his highest level staff to advise the Secretary General on the agenda. Today, that position is held by Canadian Claire Hutchinson. Moreover, beyond just a posting, the position leads the development and implementation of the NATO/EAPC policy on women, peace, and security and its accompanying action plan. This is clearly a signal of the importance of the position for NATO, and I think it sends a signal beyond NATO headquarters on the commitment of NATO. In 2006, he also appointed the first ever Deputy Secretary General, Rose Gottemuller, a female, to that position. She's very knowledgeable on the WPS agenda. She has advocated for it and has a level, I think, of expertise that really speaks well to the mission of women and gender and gender participation. There's also been significant outreach to high-level decision makers on gender issues within their various directorates in headquarters, and more recently there's an effort also to reach out to other international organizations, thereby gaining from them as well as NATO learning some lessons from these other international organizations. There are also at headquarters a few other organizational institutions that have provided important support. The NATO Parliamentary Assembly has put political pressure on NATO to go through with this agenda due to a couple of very outstanding members of various national missions, parliamentary representatives, not members, but representatives of the various national groupings. And they have actually held hearings, and they have done follow-up early on, too, as NATO adopted the WPS agenda. There's also an establishment more recently of a civil society advisory panel that to reach out beyond NATO to civil societies and actually try within NATO and EAPC to reach communities outside of Brussels and outside of other places And finally, through this the leadership component of it, action plans have proved to be substantial indicators of progress or lack thereof, and a check on the implementation of desired programs. On the military force side of NATO, the international military staff, through a designated office, oversees and encourages operational implementation. There are gender advisors at SHAPE and MONS, as well as other commands, Allied Command Operations, all Joint Force Commands, Allied Command Transformation, KFOR, and Resolute Support in Afghanistan. For deployed national troops, just to give you one data point, there are about 12% are women, albeit with very wide variance from country to country. Some countries having significantly more women in their forces who are deployed, and others less. There's also outreach and field-based operations. And finally, and importantly, there are national reports, which are required annually, that reinforce then the NATO operational objectives and provide critical data points to determine whether or not the milestones have actually been reached. So where are we then today? Well, there's a NATO policy and action plan for implementation that was adopted in Brussels in 2018, this summer summit, and they hold the potential to move the agenda forward if implemented. The two documents will approach it along 3 lines, each of which of them has charts for detailed implementation under the 3 NATO tasks, which are cooperative security, crisis management, and collective defense, ending them with sort of an evaluation and a monitoring, as well as public diplomacy. But those 3 are the adopted NATO sort of strategic goalposts. What they have done then is what this report does is to try to bring together the milestones that have been set for WPS, which is 3 of them: integration, working in gender perspectives in all of NATO's policies, programs, and projects, guided by effective gender mainstreaming practices. A second one is inclusiveness, ensuring that women are fairly represented at NATO and at all aspects of NATO. And the third one is integrity, which enhances the accountability with regards to the implementation of the mandate. So having said that, it all sounds great, right? But there's, as I said, there are also problems. Leadership. The process for selecting the special envoy, it's great that we have one. She's incredibly experienced in all aspects from low to high, but it wasn't filled for a year. And I don't think that that sends a very good signal to the organizations or to the outside about your commitment. There's also problems in that there are meetings that are aimed at bringing in the main concepts that are desired under the WPS program in 1325. But the directors don't always show up. Very often it's deputy directors. Sometimes it's even lower level officials. And so you don't really have that kind of support and ongoing discussion that I think is really needed. They complain that they're overwhelmed by their own schedules. Well, we've all heard that one. So, and there's now a full action plan, and it's actually, take a look at it, it's actually quite impressive, but will it be fulfilled? I think that's still to be seen, whether or not it can actually whether or not all its goals will actually be able to be obtained. On the military, there needs to be more buy-in at the command level. most of the time from the reports that we've heard and the discussions with gender advisors is that the commander in a unit will say, go do this training, and then you know how many show up at that training. There is one instance which we heard was where the colonel himself went to the training. Then everybody showed up. So you can see how important it is to try to get buy-in from the command. Gender advisors also need to move into the field operations to really be taken seriously. And this perception of seriousness and contribution by women is so critical to their being able to accomplish what we would hope that they would accomplish. And having them at headquarters is not always the best thing. As a matter of fact, I'd say I think it's much better that you've got them on the ground in operations. Gender advisors in the field, and I think you're going to hear this also from the EU, should not be dual and triple-hatted. There's a real inclination to make the gender advisor also the human rights, also something else, and I think it really needs to be seen that if they can focus their time on gender mainstreaming and the objectives of the role, we'd be much better off. The training should be centralized for members and partners in Brussels or on site. And if that's not possible, there should at least be guidelines developed for training that are distributed. There is discussion about this, but I think that there needs to be much more of a focus. There'll be one country that will give you half a day training, 3 hours, 2 hours, and there'll be others like the Nordic Center where you might get a week or 2 weeks. That's not really acceptable. Everybody should be on the same sheet of paper and trying to accomplish the same things. And by the way, all gender advisors should not be women. We should have gender advisors across the sexes. Finally, the national reporting, which is done by the IMS, the International Military Staff, has become increasingly forthcoming. So most of the nations are now doing it. Initially, you'd only had a few nations that were actually providing it. And this is where the data is very important to be collected, because without the data that we get from the individual countries about what's going on in their homes, towns, and in their home states, and also within the headquarters and all, we're lost at really trying to get good calculations, and Gwen does that so well here in the Women in Public Sector and group, but I think a lot more needs to be done in a lot of different areas. So, and let me just end with saying that this national reporting also permits the different countries to learn from each other and to take away what are best practices. And sometimes the NATO members don't want to admit it, but I saw a few cases where they learned from the partners. So I think that's a critical point. All right, thank you very much, and let me turn it over to Laura Groenendaal, who is at Brussels.
All right, thank you so much, Gale. It's great to be here in DC, but I will take you now to the other side of the Atlantic, to Europe and the European Union. I will first of all say something about the EU and its military missions. Then I will focus specifically on gender advisors and focal points in the EU's missions. And then I will say something more about the recommendations in our report. So first of all, the EU and its military missions. So the EU currently has 6 ongoing military missions and 10 civilian missions under its Common Security and Defense Policy, CSDP, which are all directed by the European External Action Service in Brussels. And gender equality belongs to one of the core principles of the European Union. Also in its most important documents, the Treaty of the European Union, Article 2 and 3, and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, Article 8 and 10, these principles are highlighted. And we really stress that this is very important for the EU. What it also aims to is to eradicate all gender inequality and discrimination. But if we actually look closer at the EU's military missions, we see that there is only a very small percentage which are actually women. That's often between 3 and 8%, depending on rotation. So we see here that there is a mismatch between the rhetoric of the EU and what is actually happening in practice. And in order to change this, the EU has initiated several policy documents, and there are two which I actually really would like to highlight. That is the 2008 Comprehensive Approach, which highlighted the implementation of UN SCR 1325, so that's the UN resolution Gale mentioned before. And what the EU tried to do is to create a holistic approach. So not only focus this on the security field, but also on the benefits women bring, for instance, to society and economics, and in this way incorporate that in its external activities and action. And what is specifically meant for military missions was that gender should also really be in focus for training, pre-deployment training, in order to incorporate this and also bring that to the host countries. Another very important document was the 2016 baseline study, and this evaluated EU policies when it comes to implementing gender in its military missions. And there were actually a few recommendations which were highlighted. So the first one was that we actually need more women in management positions, because they can really set an example. The second one was also to incorporate gender in planning and have it well incorporated into the mission's mandate. So once gender policies are in place, one can always refer back to the mission's mandate. And the third one was to have a structure of gender advisors and gender focal points in military missions. And that is actually a point I want to focus on more deeply. So gender advisors and gender focal points. Since 2015, the new position was established of a principal gender advisor at the European Union External Action Service in Brussels. This is Mara Marinaki, and she is the one who takes the lead when it comes to coordinating all gender issues in the EU's external outreach. And this means that she focuses on the EU internally and externally, and really raises awareness and a greater visibility of the issue in gender when it comes to foreign policy. They're not only gender advisors so in Brussels, but also in the military missions themselves. And they have the aim to implement UNSCR and gender policies in the missions themselves, in line with the mission's mandate, but also to provide strategic advice when it comes to gender mainstreaming in the missions. There are, however, differences between gender advisors and gender focal points, which I would like to highlight. So gender advisors are the experts who are trained in gender issues and have this as a full-time position. And the gender focal points are the non-expert positions. So people have no prior knowledge in gender, but learn during their job and by doing. And they are also part-time. We have heard from our interviews that having a gender advisor in your mission makes a real difference. So even if the mission already addressed gender in its mandate, having a gender advisor on the ground as a constant reminder to everyone in the mission makes a difference in the sense that it really brings more awareness and is really incorporated in all activities. A challenge, however, is that, as Gale already mentioned, often they not only focus on gender, but also have the task to introduce human rights into the mission. And of course, gender and human rights encompass so many issues, so many different problems, and it's a very heavy workload for them. And the same is for focal points, who already are part-time and then also have to focus and on gender and on human rights. And as Gale already highlighted for NATO, also in the EU, there is a lack of understanding from the leadership, what gender actually encompasses and what it can bring to the mission. And if those in the leadership positions do not attend important missions, it also gives out this message that gender is something of a low priority. And that brings me actually to the recommendations of our report. So in our report, we highlighted 3 recommendations. The first one was political attention and awareness. Secondly, political pressure and accountability. And thirdly, a stronger follow-through in implementation. So first of all, political attention and awareness. This is also very much about the concept of gender, because gender is often, as we found out, combined with human rights, international law, these issues often considered as relatively soft or having a low priority. Well, we discovered by highlighting the benefits these can bring, such as operational effectiveness, it generates greater support and understanding what gender is actually about. What we also found in terms of framing is that often women are seen as victims, as the ones who have to be protected. Well, actually, if you focus on the fact that women can actually bring something to the mission and contribute to its outcome, we see that there would also be more support for gender activities. And very important in this regard is also to train the leadership to make them aware of these benefits, so there can also be a top-down approach to everyone in the mission, and this message can be spread across. The second point was political pressure and accountability. This focuses not only on political pressure when it comes to the EU or NATO or other international organizations, but especially also the member states. When it comes to recruitment, and the EU, for instance, it are actually the member states who nominate those for an open and new positions. So it are actually the member states as well which need to be pressured to nominate more women for senior positions. And this is also the case for training. It is often the member states who organize pre-deployment training. And if we look at the EU, we saw very big differences between these countries. So there should also be more efforts to coordinate these trainings and to learn from each other and to pressure countries who do not live up to the standard. And in this regard, it's also very important to have more data available. If you want to set a target and really see if organizations live up to this, there should be more knowledge about how many women are in these organizations, how many women are on the ground, and can we see a trend, or do we see no change at all? And once this data is more available, we also envision a stronger role for civil society organizations, NGOs, and also perhaps assessment groups. And that brings me to my third and last point, a stronger follow-through in implementation. It is very important that targets are mandatory political commitments. What we see now often is that it's voluntary, but if there would be mandatory commitments, organizations, civil society organizations, and for instance, think tanks as well, can really address these issues and come up to the governments if this is really not being lived up to. What we also see is that more research needs to be done. When we look, for instance, at military missions and these numbers, in the EU, 3 to 8% are women in military missions, we do not know what positions these women hold. There are no specific data whether these women are secretaries, interpreters, or hold very high positions. And in order to also generate more women in especially high positions, and as an example, it is very important that we have a better overview what these women are actually doing in the missions. And thirdly, it is also important, to end with a positive note, to have more stories of best practices available. So other missions can learn from each other. Now often these documents which focus on the implementation of gender are not published online. There is one good example of a civilian mission, it's the mission in Georgia of the EU, which published all their gender efforts online. If there are success stories and good examples, it is important that these are available so that missions can also learn from each other. And not only within the EU, but also that the EU and, for instance, NATO can learn from each other. So there should be an increased exchange of knowledge and data. So that brings me to our conclusion. When we think of military missions, we often think of guns, massive tanks, well-trained soldiers, but we actually highlighted in our report that an issue such as gender can also bring specific and very concrete advantages to military missions, and especially operational effectiveness.
Wonderful. Well, that seems like a great segue, Laura, as you sit down. Thank you. So we have with us on the stage, the panel, we are being joined, if you will, by Ellen Haring, who is the Senior Fellow at the Women in International Security, WIIS, and she's the Director of the Combat Integration Initiative and Project, or Initiative. But let's pick up, and this will be a good place to start on one of Claire Hutchinson's, what she calls the 3 I's, the integration piece, and take a little bit of a step back, because it's a great follow-on, Laura, from your final point of the benefits in terms of operational effectiveness of having women in the military. And I think we had some good news about a week and a half ago where Slovenia now has the military run by a woman. So there are positive things happening. But Ellen, I'd like to start with you on that, a little bit around this integration and the benefits piece of this.
Sure. So my research has been on, most recently on the women who are integrating the ground combat units in the U.S. military. And last month I was in Poland interviewing the infantry and armor women who are deployed over there as part of Atlantic Resolve. My focus has been on how are they being received, integrated, and that kind of thing. But on the flip side, you've always got to make this argument that their presence will actually improve or increase operational capabilities, even though that's really kind of a unfair demand on them. They're providing their services as themselves, and to have them both prove that they can do what men do, but then also prove that they somehow or another add something has been a bit of a challenge, or a heavy burden, frankly, to place on these young women who are second lieutenants and entry-level enlisted women. However, from earlier research from the cultural support teams that we did at WIIS, we know that women's presence has a number of impacts that do improve mission effectiveness. One of the things, and this isn't necessarily an improvement, is that women's presence, just their mere presence in these formations, changes and professionalizes to some degree the behavior of these units. I was talking to one of the women at Fort Bragg. We also interviewed the infantry women last weekend, and one of them said that some of the guys have complained, oh, we have to change we can't talk about the things we talked about before you came, and they were like, well, you probably shouldn't have been saying those things to begin with, kind of thing to them. So it has had this sense of elevating the behavior, what's deemed acceptable among these, so a professionalizing, if you will. Some of the other things that we found from the cultural support team women is that their presence on ranger teams and they did keep data on this, had the effect of increasing mission effectiveness overall by about 20%, because the women were able to interact with the men, or with the women and the men in Afghanistan in ways that our soldiers, armed soldiers, were not able to interact. And so they were typically about 20% more effective across the board. And ranger teams, after time, realized that the teams were more effective when women were on them, and so they began requesting that their team, they would often kick off other people from the team if they were flying in on a helicopter, just so that they could have 1 or 2 women on their team. So those are the kinds of, raised professionalism, better impact on the ground. It also decreases bad behavior and reduces the incidence of disciplinary problems within the ranks and not necessarily that women make men behave better, but because women are less likely actually to get into trouble. So the more women you have in the ranks, the fewer disciplinary problems you're having across the board. So these are just a few of the concrete examples, I think, is what you're looking for.
No, absolutely. And I think, Laura and Gale, you probably have some best practices, either places like Mali, perhaps on the EU, or NATO in Afghanistan, of some of the integration. Laura, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So we looked at an example of a trainings mission in Mali, where the aim of the mission was to train the armed forces in Mali and in such a way create more stability in the country. And before, there was no gender component in the training, but then I decided to introduce this. And when they started off, they realized that a lot of the soldiers in surveys gave answers that, for instance, rape was seen as a normality of war, and they somehow had to make clear that this is not acceptable, and it's a violation of international law. So the way they did it, because these people often did not have the same educational background as the ones who came over to train, is that they tried to make it more personal and to stress imagine if it's your mother or if it's your daughter. And they also stress the honor of the soldiers. As a soldier, it is your honor. It's honorable to be trusted by society. It's your job to make sure that people come to you if there is a problem. And in this way, by theoretical classes, but also by practical exercises, they stressed how important it is to actually protect women and also children from violent sexual assaults, for instance. And by the end of this training course, they did the same survey, And those who saw that rape was a normality of war now give a completely different answer, said that they would also always treat women the way as they would treat their wives or their daughters. And there we saw a very concrete and very important impact, what it means to have gender incorporated in military missions.
An example that's actually in the brief is that we came across was in Afghanistan on an instance where there was going to be a large, fairly heavy equipment needed on the other side of a village. And the only real way to go through the village was the one main highway that connected several of the different locations and villages. And the commander, who was the gender advisor for that unit, realized that if it actually went through the village with the kind of equipment that they were talking about, that one, the children would not be able to go to school because of the damage that it would do to the road, and two, the pregnant women in the village would be unable to reach the midwife with whom they were working. And so he went to the commander, they looked over what kind of machinery was actually needed, and they downsized. They said, well, we don't really need that very heavy piece of machinery. We could do it with much lighter machinery and not tear up the road. And by the way, the overall sort of security question was enhanced because you didn't leave after this maneuver with a lot of resentment from the town that would not be able to make it would take them a long time to make the kind of repairs that would be needed to start using the road again. So you know, a good success story there, and the kinds of things that a gender advisor can bring to the discussion.
And I want to push a little bit from all of you on the point you made about sort of the training piece and the getting this. If I heard a little bit of either more standardized, there's the experience level of who's coming in and the training that's been appropriate. As someone who's worked in gender in the international development and in humanitarian settings, you know, those can sort of cut both ways. So I'd love a little thought, and you made a recommendation on sort of better maybe coordination and better trainings. I don't know, Ellen, if you want to jump in, but I'd love to hear from all of you. Kind of let's dive down into that a little bit, either best practices or further thoughts on that.
So, so the women that I interviewed, they're just women. They're not trained on gender. They don't know, you know, and frankly, being a woman doesn't mean you know anything about gender.
Absolutely.
However, they do have different experiences of life than men do, which makes them more receptive and more sensitive to the gendered position that they are in. It doesn't necessarily mean that it translates necessarily, but from what my observation with these young women is that there is a greater awareness of the gendered nature of their position relative to that of men. But I think really it's all about the training and education. And if you're talking about gender advisors and gender focal points.
Well, what we came across was a very uneven acceptance of the training and the kind of training that the gender advisors' focal points were going to get, as well as some of the women in the military itself. But we're focusing right now on the former, and that is that each country very much wants to do it themselves. Well, not always, but that becomes the problem, and so you get gender advisors' focal points that are maybe have an hour or two of training before they leave. Or one that we ran into, he didn't find out that he was going on an assignment for 4 months, and he found out the day he got there that he was in fact the gender advisor, and he never even heard of them. He didn't know what to do. So I think that there needs to be much more collaboration, preferably a lot of coordination, and I think an effort really to try to convince the NATO member states and in the case of NATO and the partner states that there is a reason really to try to coordinate and to try to make sure that all of these gender advisors have the same kind of training when they go to their deployments and when they're actually on the ground and trying.
There's not a standard job description for these individuals?
Yes, but you know, when you're talking about different cultures, it is very difficult sometimes to translate it. Not just in language translation, but in cultural translation about what you need for the women, what kind of training the women actually need. So I think if there was a greater coordination, and there's actually proposed in this 2018 national the action plan and then the implementation part of it for a handbook. And we'll just have to wait and see whether that actually occurs. But I think that would be a start. And then, of course, you have to be sure that you have some outreach to be sure that the different member states are actually using it. There's a Nordic center that does a lot of training, but not all the states, I don't know, either have the funds or want to send their female soldiers, male soldiers to this training center. But the training center is quite good. I mean, it has a very good reputation. But not all the countries want to do that, and that's their national prerogative, actually.
Well, I'd just like to add, I went through the 2-week course in Sweden, and although it is relatively good, the problem isn't that people don't want to send them, it's capacity. They don't have the capacity to meet the needs for all the gen ads and the focal point requirements.
Absolutely. Laura, do you want to come in?
We saw that as well in the EU. That's indeed a matter of capacity. And member states provide their own pre-deployment trainings, which always include gender, but it's different to extent. Like Gale mentioned, it can either be like a full day, it can be a 2-hour course. So what some gender advisors and focal points also do in the missions themselves is to follow up with an additional round of training. However, what we found out then in military missions is that the deployment period is very short. This is sometimes 4 months, half a year, and then especially the leadership often sees that it's not worth to come up with another round of training. So that is also one challenge when it comes to capacity and training, which we...
Yeah, it's a timing issue. Before I turn it over to the audience, I'd love to get an example from Gale and Laura on what are some of the best practices or a best example of either integrating the gender advisors or the focal points? Is there somebody who sort of seems to be doing it right? Not that the others are doing it wrong, but in terms of best practices.
What I thought was one very good example was an annual meeting in Brussels. So every year in summer, there is a meeting organized by the European Council, and all gender and human rights advisors meet for a full day and discuss their best practices. So it's really an exchange of what works well, what needs to be improved. It's not only at the council, but also other organizations invite these women, for instance, Women in International Security. And I think these meetings are very useful because often gender advisors and focal points don't meet their counterparts in other missions.
Exactly.
So it's very good to bring them together and meet and learn from each other in that way. Yeah.
Exactly.
There are meetings during the year. I don't know that they bring everybody together. There are somewhere around 600 gender advisors and focal points. But I do think that absolutely that kind of exchange can be very good. And I was at the EU one where we heard quite a bit of discussion, and they were supposed to be presenting to us, which was WIIS Brussels. And actually, I think they learned more from each other. They go, "Oh, what do you do now?" Those were both advisors, so you can see that the best practices, if you can get them together and then have updates and everything, can be very, very, very helpful. One of the things the EU has been very involved in also is their missions in the Med. All are required to have gender advisors on them, and so that has been was quite interesting to hear what it was like to be on a ship as they were picking up immigrants from the Mediterranean and all.
And Ellen, not to leave you out of best practices, but maybe more on the line of the integration of the military itself. Is there some best practices that you'd like to highlight for the audience?
Yeah, so participation best practices. This is increasing the number of women within your formations. Well, of course, there's conscription. That goes, I would say, a long ways, but it hasn't gone a long ways in Sweden and Norway, which have moved actually to conscripting both men and women. In fact, both of those countries still fall way below the United States. So there's the potential for conscription, although Israel does conscript men and women, and as a result, they have about 33% of their forces made up of women. Quotas. Some countries do follow a quota system. South Africa, in particular, is noteworthy for their quota system, and they have about 24% women. Of course, you can do goals, push with goals. In the United States, we actually have a fairly, relative to other NATO and EU and partner nations, we have actually a fairly high representation. At this year, we hit 17%, which is higher than, say, Canada, France, Sweden, Norway, Denmark. And how do we do that? There's some discussion that it has to do with our educational incentives. Women are more likely to chase educational incentives than men, and as a result, we in the US have 17% in climbing. Each year it climbs about a percentage point for women in the military. So there's ways to increase women's participation through incentives, carrots and sticks. I love the data now that's beginning to be collected in NATO and EU, and just revealing and letting countries know where they stack up relative to other countries. So those are some of the ways. The problem, though, that I have found is we don't retain women at the rates that we retain men. And the reason we don't retain them is twofold. One is policies that are not conducive to having families, and women leave about mid-career when they begin to have families. The second thing is climates that marginalize, climates where women are marginalized and harassed, and they say, I'm out of here. And they leave at higher rates for family reasons, and then bad climates. So it's not just a matter of recruiting them, it's a matter of retaining and keeping them in an environment in which they want to work.
Sounds like very similar challenges across industries as well, for better or for worse, and I know some of the women in this audience probably have some thoughts. So let's turn it over to you. We've got about 10 or 15 minutes for questions, and then we'll have time after to have a drink and look through the policy brief. But please, does anyone have any questions for our panel? And we'll bring one over here. And please introduce yourself and where you come from.
Yes. So I'm Ann Witkowski. I'm the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Stability and Humanitarian Affairs, and I had the Women, Peace, and Security line of effort in my portfolio in that role until 2016. One of the efforts that we undertook when I was in that position, in the spirit of gathering data, was to provide to the White House a required report on progress in implementing the WPS action plan. And we pressed successfully to ensure that that report was posted. I think that's no longer the case, but it was posted publicly so that the kinds of anecdotes and best practices that we could glean, which was not easy to glean them, which was not easy, could be made available widely across our own system and internationally. We, I'm sure, would have benefited from learning more from other countries' best practices as well. And so my question is, in the context of the issuance of the NATO action plan, a terrific milestone, and the implementation requirements that go along with that, is there an annual reporting requirement? If not, can we press for one to be included, and to ensure that the reports are then made widely available, not only to NATO countries and across the EAPC, but publicly as well?
Ellen, yeah.
Yeah, so NATO actually does do that now. Every 2 years they publish a report called Summary of the National Reports of NATO and Member and Partner Nations to the NATO Committee on Gender Perspectives. The last one was published in 2016, and the next one's is almost due out right now.
Yeah.
Oh, you have it right there.
Yeah, I have a copy of it, and it's really good on data.
Yes, it
That's
is
what
pretty
you
good.
said.
Well, it's relatively good, but as you pointed out, it doesn't show you mid-grade and senior
No.
grade.
No.
the way.
We're going to get to that. We're working on that. No, but it's, yeah, and I just, Claire Hutchinson was saying, you know, it's just gotten updated, so I'm glad it's good, because that's part of the big challenge, is figuring out really what's going on. And it's part of the third I in NATO, which is the integrity piece. So the question will be, does it become disseminated and shared so people can actually see, which sounds like it will be.
Well, also this 2018 then implementation and action plan that Claire Hutchinson put out, that does, and I think that's what Gwen is referring to, does require more data. So, you know, as I said, we have to see that it's all done. That's a different question to go from point one to point two. But assuming that it is, and this is really a step up from what's been required in the past. So I think they're very serious about trying to get more data.
I don't want to monopolize this, but just to put a fine point on how important this is, when we engaged with senior military officers about implementation of WPS, frequently the question we got, obviously, was, you know, okay, so, and what will be the effect? What's the operational effectiveness of implementation? And the more we can put out there, the more that we can provide to those who genuinely are prepared to undertake leadership in this area, the more progress will be made on this issue.
Absolutely.
Absolutely agree. I mean, I think if you don't just have the data there, then what I was talking about in highlighting, you know, operational effectiveness, then people have to actually have the proof that it happens, and then begin to pick it up at what they're doing as the best practices, and actually begin to act in that way to improve it. But if nobody sees there's any reason to reach out to women, then, you know, they're probably, everybody has a lot on their agenda, and they probably won't do it. So I think it's a very critical point.
Other questions? Corinna, up here, Vassender.
Great, thank you. The name is Mercedes Fitchett. I'm currently a student at National Defense University and DoD civilian, and I'm doing a paper on Indonesian women and children returning from the ISIS caliphate. And in doing some research on the Indonesian military and police, there is a lack of awareness and understanding with regards to the role that women and children play with positive agency in actually perpetrating extremist violence. I'm really interested in getting your recommendations on what data reports may be helpful to share with Indonesians for their law enforcement and military with regards to why they should include women in these organizations.
WIIS, Women in International Security, has been doing quite a bit on this issue, and whether they have some of the data that you need, I'm less certain. But I mean, I'd start there with the reporting that they've done. I mean, I saw a recent sheet that had quite a few different events that had been held. At the least, you could at least find probably people who have that data if WIIS itself has not put it out yet.
I guess my question is, are you talking about how to convince the military and police of why they need to increase the numbers of women, or are you talking, okay, so that's a different question, not countering violent extremism.
Well, part of it is in order for these organizations to be effective, can the argument be made that they should include women? So for example, in our military brigades, or when I was in Iraq and I accompanied one of our civil affairs teams, just the fact that I was a woman opened up those lines of communication with those communities. Do we have that type of data that we can demonstrate with regards to, and this is why you want to include women in your police and in your military forces, because it will make you more effective with regards to the women who are part of these communities, but also perhaps also perpetrating violence.
So I think you all pointed out to some of the police studies, in fact, here in the United States, that have shown that the presence of police and police forces reduces the incidence of violent interactions with the communities that they're operating in. It also increases the number of reports that they receive from community members reporting crimes. So that's one way to look at it, is look at police. And I think there's actually better and more data on the effectiveness of women within police departments than there is within the military. Although both areas have been largely, I think, ignored by researchers. And when it is researched, it's women that are curious and do that research.
Yeah, also to jump in here, we indeed looked at police.
Right.
And there was, for instance, also the National Center for Women in Policing, and they also produced data when it comes to women who were often seen as better at communicating, and were also better at diffusing potential violence situations. This center gathered data over the years, and there were really trends where this was proven.
Great. And they're in Europe or here in the States, the national?
In the States.
In the States. Thank you.
And can you pass the mic to Cornelia? And some of this research has come up in the past 10 years, like you said, more research in terms of police forces and security forces in terms of migration issues. And I think the Council on Foreign Relations, as they started to put together some of their Women, Peace, and Security data, have pulled out specific strands of this. So that would be another place. Cornelia.
So thank you all very, very much. This is terrific what you've all done with regard to the EU and NATO. My plea to you all, and of course I want everything, right? But we have in the Americas, we have every 2 years Conference of Defense Ministers of the Americas. They get together, and in their last few declarations they have said we want greater integration of women. One thing that I would encourage, and whoever is in public policy who can make these things happen, to go ahead and get it in their next declaration, that a study be done on the legal barriers as well as the barriers regarding practices that either result in no women or very few women being members of the military. And I think if we do this even broader, we can go and look at Africa. And certainly 2016, Malawi sent 50% of its contingent were women. Another African state did that. And I think those kind of examples might then result in Europeans, North Americans actually looking at ourselves and saying, wow, why can't we do it? So that would be my plea to you. But I understand this is a lot of work, and I applaud you for your work.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm with your plea. Can we come over here we'll go back there, and then we'll come to Lindsay.
Hi, my name is Maria Markley. I'm with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, and I'm a special agent. My question is, did your research disprove any myths out there about combat integration or integrating women into the military? Any common held myths that you just busted out of the sky?
Well, the biggest myth of all is that women can't do these jobs. That women could never become Army Rangers. We now have 20 women who have passed Ranger School, and 2 are now in the 75th Ranger Regiment. So I think that was the biggest myth buster, is that, first of all, women can't do it, and second of all, they don't want to do it. Well, yes, they can, and yes, they want to. So that was the biggest of all. The second thing, I think, is this notion that standards, that physical standards are immutable, and that they're never changing, and that women will somehow or another degrade or lower them. Again, first of all, they're not immutable. They change all the time. Standards often change. And women can meet whatever the standards are that are set out there. And it's not even... It's not even like super special women who can meet them, Amazonian type of women. These are, just really fit, motivated women can do these jobs. Personally, that's the biggest myth I think that's been busted in the last 5 years.
And I think there's also changing threat out there. Everything that the military does does not necessarily need the kind of physical standards and everything that they have in the past. you know, hybrid warfare, cyber. You know, there are a lot of places where we need to encourage women to become educated and become. There's a big push, of course, for women in STEM. And we all know that, and we all know that that's a big myth that women can't do STEM. It's just that they have not really been encouraged in that area. And I think in the military too, that there are increasingly more types of jobs that don't necessarily, you know, take Tarzan to do them.
Yeah, what I also think is that gender and having more women in the military is often seen as a lot of talk, a lot of blah, blah, blah. What I think we also found is that there is actually a very concrete impact. Having diverse teams leads to new ideas, more innovation, more accurate group thinking. And this is not only in the military, this is in other fields as well, such as business. So I think we really proved that gender is not only blah, 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 but it really has a very beneficial impact.
The impact argument. We'll pass it over to Lindsay for the last question, I think, and then we'll break for a reception.
Thank you. I'm Lindsay Benstead at the Wilson Center. I'm a Global Fellow in the Global Women's Leadership Initiative and the Middle East Program. You mentioned the problem or the challenge of retaining women in the military and allowing them to access greater leadership and command. I wonder if you could speak to whether there's research about women's effectiveness as commanders and leaders in the military specifically, whether in terms of curbing sexual harassment or other kinds of research on their effectiveness. And then I also wanted to make a comment as well with regard to issues around women in STEM and in the military. I wonder if one of the challenges is really around public perceptions and encouraging young women and girls to enter the military and encouraging society to accept that and promote that. Thank you.
So thoughts about commander effectiveness and whether that type of research has been done?
I don't know any research that's been done that's looked at are women better commanders than men are. Do you?
I'm trying to think whether the research is there, but I could certainly show you around the Naval Academy. And when I first got there, that only accepted 11% women. So it was so much more competitive. It still is more competitive for women because of the numbers being having a ceiling. But and it's now almost 30% women. And if you'd like to meet the head of the Naval Academy Foreign Affairs Conference, the head of the Leadership Conference, brigade commanders that have 5,000 midshipmen that are under them, and those that even have succeeded. We had 3 Naval Academy alumni who ran for Congress recently. You know, there are all kinds of very good examples, but I guess I'm with Ellen trying to think of some of the studies that have been done, but certainly I think that the men at the Academy, we've come a long way. We've come a really, really long way, and I think I won't say it's perfect yet. It's still not. There's still some oddballs out there that haven't accepted it, but they're not commanding anything at the Academy, by the way. So I think there's lots of proof if anyone wants to do the studies.
Yeah, just for a plug for West Point, last year the top 6 graduates were all women.
And the dean.
Well, and it'll be interesting, I think, and sort of to tie that piece as they start to look at what leadership is. And they're out of Italy, they've mapped, you know, the qualities of leadership, showing that either jobs that women done or personality traits that people view women to have map those qualities of leadership. So the question becomes interesting for effective command, like some of the threads we've talked about today, how some of this is or is not just like the STEM fields or the private sector or the government sector. I mean, one of my myth busts in doing our index of where women are in government generally was that until recently, there was about the same number of women in the U.S. military as there were in the U.S. Congress, really. So it wasn't this vast disproportion of there's no women that want or aren't effective in national security, and they're all over here running for office. Now, that may or may not change, but it's not vastly different. So on that note, I would like to, to close this. And one point for those of you that are in the U.S. is that we did, under the Women, Peace, and Security Act, adopt our act and are working on our strategy in the United States. And we will be doing a series here at the Wilson Center and beyond on sort of where we are in implementing specifically in the U.S. the Women, Peace, and Security Act and our recommendations and implementations as well to follow. And working through also these, more of these speakers of who are some of these women and what are the issues. And I also, using my moderator stand for a second, happy to engage anyone and reminding me to get you to help me get the data that we need to actually be able to show this. But I would like to thank all of the speakers, Gale, Laura, and Ellen, for being candid, for sharing the latest research and threading, I think, the important thing about the more we share, the more we talk about these best practices and the positive examples, the more this will continue to be the norm and continue to involve women at all levels. So thank you for your presentations.
Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. We've got quite a program today, so we're going to get started right on time. Good morning and welcome to the Wilson Center. I'm Sarah Barnes, and I lead the Maternal Health Initiative here at the center. For those of you who are not familiar with the Woodrow Wilson Center, it is a living memorial to President Woodrow Wilson, who remains the only president to have earned a PhD. The center is nonpartisan. It's true. People are always Googling it right as I say it, but it's true. It's a nonpartisan and non-advocacy policy forum, and we're focused on independent research, open dialogue like we have here today, and actionable ideas. And the Maternal Health Initiative is just one of the center's thematic programs. So we work across regions, and we really explore a wide range of policy-related topics focused on the health of women, the health of adolescents, and of children. So this year, we've been fortunate enough to partner with World Vision on a 3-part event series. The first 2 events we held were in May, and the first focused on healthy timing and spacing of pregnancy. The second was on involving men and boys in HIV prevention work. So today we're thrilled to also be partnering with World Vision to bring you an event focused on adolescent girls' health and education, particularly focused on HIV/AIDS and the DREAMS Innovation Challenge. I'm sure many of you are familiar and you'll learn a lot about DREAMS today, but I just wanted to give a brief overview. DREAMS is a global public-private partnership led by the U.S. President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, or PEPFAR, and is managed by JSI Research and Training Institute, Inc., and is committed to reducing new HIV infections among adolescent girls and young women in sub-Saharan Africa. MHI recently held another event focused on adolescents and health. And one of the main learnings that I walked away with was that in addition to being knowledgeable about the increased risks adolescents face, it's also very important to remember that adolescence can and should be a positive time for young people. So it's the time to really support young people's access to information, to education, skills, and to services to help offer a healthy and safe transition into adulthood. DREAMS is an example of this type of support of youth and addresses the structural drivers that increase girls' HIV risk, including poverty, gender inequality, sexual violence, and lack of education. Today, we have an incredible group of panelists, including 2 Youth DREAMS beneficiaries, here to discuss these structural drivers and to talk to us about emerging lessons, best practices, and preliminary findings of the DREAMS Innovation Challenge. We have several speakers here today who have traveled from Kenya, Uganda, Zambia. Please help me in thanking them for all of their efforts to be here today. I would also like to thank Julie DeSoto from World Vision and Jamie Rosen from JSI for all of the coordination to make this event happen, and my own mighty team at MHI for all of your hard work. For today's event, we have 2 amazing speakers to start us off, and then we will invite the panel to the stage to talk to us about some of the innovations of DREAMS. And then before we close the event today, we will have an interactive Q&A with the audience, and we encourage those who are watching the live feed to please send in questions to @Wilson_MHI. At last check, we had over 100 people registered to watch the live webcast, so that's pretty incredible today. So now I will turn things over to our panelists, starting with our moderator, Palami Harris. Palami is currently the project director for the DREAMS Innovation Challenge Funds Manager at JSI Research and Training Institute, Inc. As funds manager, JSI supports 46 organizations funded by PEPFAR to implement DREAMS programs in 10 countries. With JSI staff based in most of these countries, JSI manages the funds, develops grantees' institutional capacity to manage their awards, and provides technical assistance and monitoring for overall program performance. Palami and all the speakers' full bios are printed and available outside of the room. So thank you again for coming to the Wilson Center, and another warm welcome for all of our speakers.
Thank you, Sarah. The arrangement of justice does not stand of themselves. There is one thing that the American people always rise to: the truth of justice. It is going to lead us and through us, the world, into pastures of quietness and peace. So said Woodrow Wilson. The truth of justice is being manifested through the lives of the young women we are here to listen to this morning. And so I will start off with inviting you to watch the video that has been put together by World Vision, and we will continue. Thank you.
A lot of challenges in life. I've known what life is. I dropped out of school because of poverty. My parents were not able to pay my school fees since they're just peasant farmers. I didn't have somebody to support me because I don't have my dad and my mom is not there. I only live with my grandma. I was just home there doing no academic job, but helping my parents with housework. Boys see you that you're a dropout now, they start coming to disturb you. It overpowers me, those challenges overpowers me. And sometimes I even had the heart of giving up. I was very bad thinking it was the end of life.
Identifying that maybe students are about to drop out of school, we did not have such an idea. You would go to class, you make a roll call, and maybe you discover that maybe 2 or 3 students have dropped out. And for us, we thought it was normal.
So we, as the peer leaders, we get to know the reason why these girls are dropping out of school and what exactly the challenges they are facing. My main role is just to educate the girls on the importance of education, how to protect themselves, and to be also exemplary to them.
I had to send a teacher to go through the homes and look for Irene because I knew she's a brilliant girl.
Adong Irene, have you ever heard about the man?
The goal I set for my life, I had not yet achieved it. That's why it was so wonderful that I came back to school.
We decided to go with the teacher to visit her and find out why she was not in school.
My mom was scared because she thought they were just going to maybe arrest her because of the other balance. So we were scared but when she said she was going to bring me back to school, and from there we were now happy.
She was overwhelmed by happiness that we had visited her.
I feel great, I feel happy. It was so good that night. Abnormal profit in a short run, but still under perfect competition.
Both arts and sciences, she was the best performer.
When the price is high, the quantity demanded will be low.
Dreams helped us to ensure that we also retain girls who will be safe, who will not be endangered by HIV or get into marriage at another stage, but continue with their studies.
I really have great ambitions in my life. I have big dreams to achieve. I want to be a lawyer. Now I'm seeing a future for tomorrow. I'm now seeing my family somewhere because I've managed to come back to school. So from here, we are going to do our short-run marginal cost. My dream is to become an accountant. Foundation.
The truth of justice. Our first speaker to lead us down this road is Dr. Anjali Atrekar. She is the acting principal deputy coordinator of the Office of the U.S. Global AIDS and coordinator and health diplomacy. I'd like to invite her to come to the stage.
Thank you, Falumi. Thank you all. It's so wonderful to be here. I really want to first start off by thanking the Wilson Center for hosting such an incredible event. I also want to thank JSI, World Vision, and particularly the partners in the room that are also joining via webcam, but also the young women that have made the trip from all parts of Africa to be here with us today. It is so important to hear your voice. I think the video, it gets me every time. Just the voices that we hear from you are why we do this. This is why we continue to do this every single day. So, it's, I want to start by taking us back. This season, December, cold, 4 years ago, when we first launched Dreams, it was the biggest, boldest vision, I think, that Ambassador Birx, who I'm privileged to be here today to speak on behalf of, this was the biggest, boldest vision that she and our team, who's here in the second row here, our small Dreams team at the office, put together this incredible public-private partnership that was comprised of the Gates Foundation, Gilead, Johnson & Johnson, ViiV Healthcare, Girl Effect, together with 10 African countries at the time to see if we could try something big, bold, different, innovative, to really not focus on the problems of adolescent girls and young women, but the potential, the possibility, and the power that each one of them represents. This public-private partnership that was launched 4 years ago around this time has really transformed, I would say, a huge portion of the world. And it's humbling to be here with all of you and so many of you who are implementing this broad program across now 15 countries that is having a transformative impact on the lives of so many adolescent girls and young women. To date, since that launch in 2014, we have invested over $800 million in the entire partnership and program to serve these adolescent girls and young women. We had one intention, and that was really to have an impact on these lives of the adolescent girls and young women, to really show that we could bring multiple sectors together, multiple solutions together to really address the issues and various factors that have been impacting adolescent girls, the lives of adolescent girls and young women. So really bringing multiple solutions to one problem with that vision of ensuring that every adolescent girl and young woman could grow up to be determined, resilient, empowered, AIDS-free, mentored, and safe women. Dreams, and I have to say, now as we reflect this World AIDS Day, which just passed December 1st, a couple weeks ago, and we were able to share our latest results, which I'll talk about in a second. Dreams has really exceeded our wildest imagination. It has exceeded our wildest dreams. The impact of the program and the people that have joined hands with us to make this a reality for so many adolescent girls and young women has been extraordinary. In 2017, we released the impact of the program after 13 months of implementation. And at that time, this was in 2017, at that time, the Dreams program that had been implemented in as I said, 10 different countries across Africa in the highest burdened HIV districts and communities that comprised over 60 districts. At that time, we were seeing extraordinary impact, real impact. New diagnoses were decreasing among adolescent girls and young women. So these are not, outputs. These are true outcomes that we were after. We saw that at that time in 2017, over 60% of those highest burdened communities saw a decrease in new diagnoses, up to 25% decrease in new diagnoses. This year, on World AIDS Day, or the week that preceded World AIDS Day, we released our latest 2018 results. And what we have seen has been extraordinary. The impact that we saw in 2017 has continued and expanded. We now see that that over, or I should say not over, but in 85% of those districts now, we're seeing continued decrease in HIV diagnoses among adolescent girls and young women. So the impact is continuing. It's continuing strong, and we're also seeing that in 8 of the highest burdened districts or communities that were previously showing a less than 25% decrease in new diagnoses have now switched, and they are actually having a greater than 25% decrease in new diagnoses. That's really remarkable, particularly when we talk about certain districts where the new infections among adolescent girls and young women are extraordinarily high, like in South Africa or Lesotho, for instance. So we're just really proud of these results. They're not our results, they're your results. They're your results. And so many other people's across the globe. So we're really thrilled about that. And I want to spend a minute to talk about the program that brings us, the project that brings us here today, which is really looking at the Dreams Innovation Challenge and the impact that's seen over time as well. So again, launched in 2016 to really complement this broader Dreams program that I just described. The focus of the Dreams Innovation Challenge was really threefold. One, to bring new innovation and solutions to complement the broader Dreams program that we were implementing. Two, to really seek out and fund new implementing partners, new and diverse and different implementing partners to bring diversity, innovation, creativity to the programming that we were implementing. And three, to really support those smaller, peer-led, community-based, local, grassroots organizations to bring those voices to the table and into implementation with the broader Dreams program. And we're so pleased that through the Dreams Innovation Challenge, which JSI has been an incredible partner in really monitoring and providing that oversight to the challenge, has really, we've really brought new partners to the game. We've brought innovation, and we've seen small organizations rise and implement with us. And we're thrilled to be able to hear the panel that will follow, that really will talk about some of these great innovations that have come through the Innovation Challenge Fund. But we've also released our overarching results from the Innovation Challenge this World AIDS Day as well. And we're pleased that the entire program that, again, complements the broader Dreams partnership has reached almost 150,000 adolescent girls and young women with HIV education and awareness efforts, has reached over 88,000 adolescent girls and young women with key interventions that are keeping them in school, many of which we'll hear about today, has increased PrEP enrollment, which is really important to the work that we're doing for over 9,000 adolescent girls and young women. And I think importantly, and something we've got to do more of, is we've reached 30,000 younger women with workforce development and economic interventions. We've got to do more of that, but we've reached that many and hope to do so much more. So the key now is for all of us to work together to figure out how, with the Innovation Challenge and the solutions that are coming out of that, how with the Broader Dreams program that's now being implemented in 15 countries, how we sustain these gains that we've made. How do we bring these innovations and solutions to scale? How do we bring the voices that we heard from the video, and we'll hear shortly from Rebecca and Sheila and others, how do we bring those voices to be heard across the continent in Africa and the other countries where we're working? So I want to commend you all for extraordinary work on the Broader Dreams program and the Dreams Innovation Challenge thus far. But I also want to challenge you all and all of us together to really maintain and sustain the work that we've been doing together and make sure that we continue to reach and impact more and more adolescent girls and young women as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Atrika, for helping us to look at the perspective and to take us through a substantive background on how we got to where we are right now. Now we're going to hear from our next speaker, Rebecca Asio, who is our youth ambassador from World Vision's Strengthening Accountability in Girls' Education. And so I invite you to join us on the stage.
All protocols observed in your various capacities, good morning. My name is Achio Rebecca, a student at St. Catherine Secondary School, Lira, in the northern part of Uganda. I'm a peer educator at my school. I was 13 years old when I started experiencing school fees problem, but the situation worsened in 2016 when I was in senior 4. Each term, they chase me more than 5 times at home. And each time I go home, I stay for more than 2 weeks. The last time I went home, I stayed for 1 month. I didn't have hope of going back to school, but I just went to do my final exams that I managed to pass with a first grade. In 2017, when I was 17 years old, I finally dropped out of school because my parents could not support me anymore. They are just peasant farmers that earn very little income. While at home, I helped my parents with garden work. We used to work in people's garden and also borrow gardens from well-wishers to farm our own to get food for the family. I also started baking cake to get some income to buy basic needs like sanitary pads and food for the family because it was difficult for us to push on. Being the fourth born of 6 children in a family, our firstborn got pregnant in P7, in primary 7, because of school fees problem. Our second-born is a boy. He struggled and reached senior 4, but he finally dropped out because my mom couldn't support him anymore. And there, he got married and is having a child. Our third-born got pregnant in primary 6. All these girls were teenagers. And in that order, everyone in the community knew I was the next. But I was so determined that until I achieve my dream of becoming an accountant, I will not drop out of school and I will not get pregnant. I vowed to myself that even if my follower gets pregnant, I will not, though it was not my prayer for her. One day, I met my teacher in church, who was very surprised to see me because they don't expect a first grader to stay at home. There he asked me very many questions. Are you pregnant? Are you sick? Why are you at home? But I told him it's because of school fees problem, that's why I'm at home. He felt pity for me, but little did I know, Sage Dreams program under World Vision was already at my school. He went back to school and reported my case to the Stay in School Committee, who that very Sunday came to our home, led by the head teacher, Mrs. Nangwala Rose Nakwagala, and the focal point teacher for Dreams, Teacher Rachel Ateng, and our deputy head teacher, Mr. Okai Michael Okipi, and the teacher who met me in charge, Mr. Oluma Tom. When we first saw them, my mother and I were very scared. We thought they had come to arrest my mother because of the school fees balance, which remained in year 2016. But they told us no, we have come to take Rebecca back to school. My mother and I started to cry tears of joy. I went back to school that very time with them, and I read like never before. I worked very hard. That missing out for 2 terms, I was able to top my class in the promotional term to senior 6. There, I was elected as a peer educator, and as a peer educator, I knew what it cost to be a dropout, and I took charge in the identification of students who are at risk of dropping out of school using the ABC predictors in the early warning system and the World Vision. I also conduct mentoring and counseling of my peers on the challenges we are facing at school. I lead sessions on selected topics like HIV/AIDS, self-esteem, confidence, determination, decision-making, and more. As a peer educator, Dreams had already taught me how to make sanitary towels, so I passed out the information to the rest of the girls. I make pads for my own use, both at home and in school, and also I make and sell to the rest at home to meet my basic needs, but I also teach girls at school how to make sanitary towels. I'm so happy that I finished my secondary school in November, and I want to go to the university to study economics and statistics so that I can achieve my dream of becoming an accountant. As a peer educator, this project has benefited me a lot. First, the project brought me back to school because they were being able to identify me using A as a predictor in the early warning system. The project taught me how to make sanitary towels, which I made it for my use, and also I sell to get income, and I passed out the knowledge to the rest. The project mentored me as a peer educator to reach out to other girls on issues like communication skills, confidence, determination, and more. The project also availed HIV/AIDS services like testing and counseling at my school, where all of us tested for HIV/AIDS. Unfortunately, majority of us were negative, and we were advised to remain negative in the struggle to eliminate this dangerous virus in Uganda and in the world. Those few who were found positive, they were counseled, and they were advised to live positively because many have made it with the virus and it's not the end of life, and so they were comfortable to stay at school, and the rest were also taught not to make fun of those students so that they can feel comfortable in school. The project also availed talking compounds to our school, like delay sex, stay with safety friends to keep safe, and more messages, which helped me a lot because it made my work very easy as a peer educator because students were informed all time. But as a peer educator, I also encountered some challenges. Most students drop out of school because of school fees problem. And as a peer educator from a humble background, I cannot bring such students back to school because I don't have money also to pay for their fees. Some students stay far away from the school. Our school is in Lira district, but others stay out of Lira district. They stay in other districts. I identify them right, but reaching them is very difficult because I don't have transport money and I don't own a car to go to those far places. Some students also drop out because of domestic violence at home. And as a 19-year-old peer educator, it makes it very difficult for me to discuss those issues with like a 40-year-old parent. But for such issues, I refer them to the adults in the stay in school committee, which has also helped a lot to bring those students back to school. As a peer educator, I have also some personal challenges, which has not made me to do my job to the maximum because we don't have our permanent home. We are just inhabitants of inhabited home. So we keep shifting from place to place because if this time around we are staying here and the owner of the house wants the house, so we have to transfer again. So before I reach every girl in the community, we have to transfer again. There I go, I get used to the system there, but I start my work, but before I reach all of them again, we have to transfer, which has made me not to reach every girl in the community. Sometimes we lack food at home, and I can't go talk to the peers with an empty stomach. And as a leader, I have to be smart, but at times we lack clothing at home, which makes me sometimes to feel shy because if I'm not smart, I cannot talk to the rest with confidence. There is also limited time at home because coming from a humble background, I need to work very hard because while at home, I continued baking cake to see that my younger siblings are going to school. They have books, they have pens, the family is eating. So most of my time I take baking the cake and selling them, and I remain with little time to meet with my peers. But as a peer educator, I've also achieved a lot. I was able to help other girls remain in school using the ABC predictors in the early warning system because once I identify a student is at risk of dropping out of school, I find out what the problem is and I deal with it accordingly to make sure that student doesn't drop out of school. As a peer educator, I've also managed to reduce corporal punishment at our school because it scares students from school. I encourage positive discipline. I achieved this through talking to teachers that corporal punishment is not good. It's not a good way to discipline children. So they have reduced and that risk has probably reduced and students are no longer dropping out of school because of corporal punishment. Menstrual problem is no longer a problem in my school because as a peer educator, I managed to teach almost every girl in the school how to make sanitary towels and they can make for their own use so they no longer drop out because of menstrual problem. As a peer educator, I managed to talk to the school administration because as a way to prevent HIV, abstinence is a method, but other students, they have high sexual feelings that make them not to choose abstinence as a method. So I request the school to avail condoms to the school nurse so that these students can use to prevent pregnancy and also HIV/AIDS. But those students who unfortunately gets pregnant at school, I've managed to talk to the school administration to give them a second chance, because others get pregnant not because of their wish, maybe they are raped, maybe unfortunately, but they still have that desire to study. So second chance are now given to them to come back to school and study. And as you can see from my story, it is really, really important programming for adolescent girls, and it makes a difference in life. And I hope, and it's my humble request, that there will be a continued support to such a program like SAGE, so that girls can be determined, resilient, empowered, AIDS-free, mentored, and safe. I thank GSI, World Vision, and PEPFAR for the smile you brought in my face. Before, I never knew I could smile this big, but I'm smiling. Thank you very much for the wonderful job you have done in Uganda and in other countries. Thank you for reaching out to the adolescents, and thank you for reducing the risk of dropouts in Uganda. Thank you very much.
We thank Rebecca and all who've contributed to emboldening this spirit, to strengthening the courage, the commitment you've heard, the courage to challenge, to not just stay in school, but to take on a school system around corporal punishment, around giving girls a second chance. These are the manifestations, the materialization of truth in justice. And we thank you very much for sharing. I'd like to continue our journey by inviting other members of the panel who will talk to us a little bit more about the programs and some of the pieces that they've had to deal with in designing and implementing their programs. So I'm going to ask for Rita Laura Lulua to please join us on the stage. She is the project director for World Vision's SAGE project. I'd like to as well ask Judy Mwangi to join us on the stage. She is representing ACWIT in the absence of its executive director. She is, Judy, that is, the senior program manager for Dreams IC in East Africa. Thank you. I'd like to as well invite Sheila Omolo, our second youth ambassador, who will be talking about our experiences through ACWIT. And finally, I'd like to invite Jane Kinney to join us. Jane Kinney Myers is the founder and president of Lubuntu Library Partners, and she will share her story as well. Thank you. Rita, please lead us.
All protocol observed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am privileged to be here this morning to to share the story and innovation of the Strengthening School Community Accountability for Girls Education, abbreviated as SAGE, which is part of the Dreams Innovation Challenge. The project is focusing on keeping adolescent girls in school. And the background context is that school dropout in Uganda is a real challenge, with only 36% of the girls completing secondary education, and with only 24% transitioning to senior 5. You can see the challenge there, that there is a big dropout. And our goal for this project is to improve retention of the adolescent girls aged 13 to 19 years in secondary school and to reduce HIV infection. Our target is 38,750 in 151 schools in the 10 districts where DREAMS is being implemented in Uganda. We have 3 key objectives. The first one is to establish an early warning system that is adolescent-led to prevent school dropout that Rebecca was referring to all the time that she spoke. The second one is to strengthen school community linkages to support adolescent girls to remain in school in order to reduce new HIV infection. And the third one is to strengthen the linkages with healthcare providers for youth-friendly reproductive health services, including HIV counseling and testing, referrals for HIV care treatment, and adherence support. Our theory of change is that if the adolescent girls at risk of dropping out of school are identified early enough by their peers and they are monitored, I am sorry, I forgot that, sorry. And they are monitored through the early warning system, and if the learning environment of the adolescent girls is improved at home, at school, and in the community, and the adolescent girls' needs are provided in a systematic way by the parents, community leaders, and other supportive structures, then the adolescent girl will remain in school and their potential risk for HIV will be significantly reduced. Because research has shown that the longer we keep the girls in school, the more they're empowered with the information, skills, and experiences that helps them to make informed decisions about their lives. This is what Rebecca was referring to, right? The early warning system uses the 3 predictors. Oh my God, sorry. Uses the 3 predictors, the ABC. The A stands for attendance, B stands for behavior, and C stands for course performance. Sorry. This is the innovation, the adolescent-led early warning system. which is dealing with the social, cultural, and economic factors that lead to school dropout. Rebecca outlined them. I'm not going to go through that. I want to emphasize the fact that we work very closely with adolescent girls. They help us to identify those girls at risk. They help us to refer the cases they cannot handle. They deal with the cases they are able to handle because we know that the adolescents listen to their peers much more than they listen to us. So we work with them. They are co-implementers. And they are supported by 9 adult members to form the Stay in School Committee that comprises between 12 to 15 people per school. And they use the early warning system to identify the challenges using the 3 predictors. Because we know school dropout does not happen just like this. It happens as a process. So the early warning system helps us to look at those early signs. For example, if the girl does not come to school every day, if the girl comes late every day, that affects the attendance, but we know that those are signs that that child is having problems that we need to dig into, which the peer educators and the Stay in School Committee deal with to prevent dropout. The same to behavior, we look at the signs that behavior problems are cropping up and performance as well. So, this is what we've learned, that the early warning system is actually effective in predicting school dropout. And from the registers that we use as evidence for taking records of the girls' attendance every day, and also the monitoring the behavior and the course performance, we realize that the early warning system is very good in predicting dropout, but course performance stands out as one of the key factors for dropout, because the girls do report that actually, however well you behaved, even if you have school fees, if you do not perform well, then chances are that you might actually end up dropping out of school. We've also realized or recognized that with the early warning system and the Stay in School Committee structure, especially the peer educators, a lot of the girls' performance has improved. Because like Rebecca says, they form groups to support the weak ones so that they can improve on their performance. The SAGE model, we've realized from our statistics and data that is highly effective at preventing school dropout. Because once the Stay in School Committee identifies the issues, the peers deal with some of it, the adults deal with some of that, and referrals are made so that the girls are prevented from dropping out of school. And we have a success rate of between 94 up to 99%. The statistics is there, and we have the presentations, and I think we can read from that as well. In addition to prevention, we also have supported through this project the adolescent girls to understand the importance of taking HIV test, and up to 23,449 have so far taken HIV test and know their status. In addition, like Rebecca said, the adolescent girls are taught how to make their own reusable pads because initially, lack of menstrual hygiene materials was a key challenge, and it used to be part of the reasons for dropout. But like Rebecca testified, it's not anymore because the girls now know how to make their own pads. They make it for use, but they also make some of it for sale to take care of their other needs. We have a number of lessons learned, but I will not go through each and every one of them. I just want to share some of the key lessons from this project. One, that the early warning system is a good way of helping in identifying the girls at risk of dropping out of school, and that we can use it to follow them up to their homes and deal with the root causes of the problem so that they're able to be supported to remain in school. Even those that fall off can be followed and brought back to school like Rebecca. Two, that the early warning system actually uses available resources, so it's doable, it's scalable. Three, the school fees is a big challenge that is still causing children to fall out of school, despite the fact that we have a system like the early warning system that actually identifies them ahead of time. And it is important to engage the entire community because it takes a community to keep a girl in school and safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you very much. We continue our 360, and we will now look at the experiences of a project that deals with bridge to employment. Judy?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm so excited to be here this morning to share about our project that is keeping girls at work. This one is the other one was keeping girls in school. This other one is a bridge to employment. It's a continuous process. Once they leave high school, now they need to go and find some work. The VUSHA Girls Employability Program is implemented by the African Center for ICT, which is an indigenous organization based in Nairobi, Kenya. We have 23 projects in East Africa, and 6 of these are in Focal Area 5, a bridge to employment. So ACWIT is one of the projects that is helping girls to find work in Nairobi and Kisumu. That's Constantine right there. Since she's not here today, we thought it's good to start with a photo. So this is one of the graduation ceremonies that were held. And you can see our Deputy Chief of Mission, Mirembe. She was there. They've supported us a lot, the US Embassy. This is the background of the DREAMS project in general, but it's a bit specific to bridge to employment and the background for ACWIT. So we have a high prevalence of HIV. Kisumu and Nairobi, they are the 3rd and the 4th highest in the country. We have youth unemployment in Kenya. This is 26.2 is in Kenya, but it ranges from 15 to about 40 or even 60 in some counties. We have so many girls who are having children, 15 to 19 years. You can see it's 18.1%. This is in Kisumu specific. And then physical gender-based violence is a big problem, and you can see the statistics there, about 23 and 33% for the girls. The target for ACWIT was 1,000 AGYW completing the Workforce Development Program. This is a USG indicator for training and life skills building. And the outcome was to link 800 girls to new or better jobs, and then to complete referrals for HIV testing for 80% of the girls, and also to improve the knowledge and perceptions in gender and HIV issues for 80% of the girls. So this is the implementation framework and the process for ACWIT. And the innovation here is it's a skill-based training, which is short, 3 months, and it's combined with theory and practical. So instead of a girl having to go to school for 1 year, they go for 3 months and then 3 months of internship. But the training is combined. You go to class in the morning, you go to do the skills practices in the afternoon. And then it's demand-driven. So we are going, ACWIT is going to the communities and mobilizing. That is to create the demand. And then they screen the girls and do vulnerability checks. And at the same time, they're talking to the employers to identify the skills gap. What is the skill that is missing? So that we are training focused on the need, the demand. Then at the same time, they're assessing the VTIs, these are vocational training institutes, and drawing MOUs with the institutes. And they use the government accredited VTIs and also the curriculum. That's one of the unique things about ACWIT. And at the same time, they're establishing mechanisms to do referrals and linkages for other services that are not offered in ACWIT. So jumping into the results, you can see that ACWIT has managed to train 92% of the girls, and then place 672 of the girls into new or better employment. The target was 800, that's why it's 84%. And then changing the knowledge on HIV by for 572. This is increased knowledge. They do a baseline and then an end line. So that number represents those who had increased knowledge. And then the referrals for HTS completed for 293 of the girls. You know, it's voluntary. And 46 of these, 46 of the girls came with their male partners, because this is the protocol that the protocol encourage you to come with your partner. And then 44% had better views on gender-based violence, because, you know, since there's so much gender-based violence, the girls and generally perceive it to be normal. They perceive it to be normal to be beaten around for minor things. So we need to work on this perception. So this is what the indicator is telling us. So it means 44% had better views. So it means we have more work to do on to change the norms and perceptions, which takes time. Sorry, I should have mentioned about the outcome, that little chart on the left. Because the focal area is focused on improving financial independence, ACWIT did a tracer survey. They surveyed 250 girls to find how much they are getting, even after placing them into jobs. And you can see that even though most of them are getting about 5,000 to 10,000 Kenya shillings, that's about $50 to $100 a month. There are others that are getting a better pay, and this improves with time. It may not look like a lot of money, but Sheila can tell you that $50 a month can be the turning point for AGYW and indeed the normal population, because some have nothing. Like Sheila will tell you she was earning like $1 per day. So 50 per month takes them above the $1 per day. Job placement by trade. I won't dwell so much on this slide, but what we are saying is that if you look at the girls that have been trained and those linked to employment, you can see that the technical courses, they have a lot of potential. It means that girls are able to do the courses and get the job. So it means the demand is there just as much as the other courses. So mechanics, electricals, ICT, girls can do it. If we identify the market well and train and place them, there's high potential there for the girls. Challenges, again, quite a number of them, but we won't go through all of them. But you can see that from the beginning, the background, the AGY debuts are young mothers. So sometimes they are not able to complete the courses because maybe they have nobody to take care of their children at home. So some drop out. And that was about 8%, but ACWIT did something about it. The baby care services and enrollment during the extension period for those who dropped out. Then follow-up of the girls after the training is a challenge because some of them don't have numbers, and just by the nature that they are vulnerable. And they are out there, unlike girls who are in school. So when they go out there, sometimes it's hard to put them together and find out how they are doing. So this is kind of a challenge. Gender-based violence, both at home and also at work. And this is a contextual problem. We found that when they are enrolled in the VTIs, sometimes the partners want to ask, where are you going now? Why are you going to be trained? Even if it's a boyfriend, it's a threat. Or even when they start earning this income, it becomes a problem, and you find there's violence at home just because of the girl now cannot stay at home. She's working, she's able to do things that she was not able to do. So ACWIT has sometimes had to intervene with the males, the partners, and also refer the girls to the partners that are doing GBV when the complaints come through to them. And then the implementation framework for the minimum wage is still a challenge at country level. It's not really something we can address right away, but ACWIT has been negotiating for the best deals for the girls, even though they are so young, to get a better salary. But they've made quite successful marks with that. We also have the general one, and this is a dreams challenge of why the girls and not the boys. So we've always clarified on the dreams TOC, and we are encouraging male champions as part of the programming for other projects that are aspiring to do dreams work. And I think we've talked about this. You can see the enabling factors, and those are pictures. Our ambassador, the project, the Dr. Tam Godek over there. They've all been to the project, and thank you.
Thank you, Judy. We understand. Reminder that the slides are available. A reminder that next up is Sheila, who is not just a graduate of her project, but also an ambassador speaking on behalf of ACWIT. Please.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning. I'm privileged to be here, and I thank God for this far. I'm Sheila Kothomolo. I'm 21 years old. I did my Kenya Certificate of Primary Education in 2011, where I attained a marks of 265. Thereafter, I joined a secondary school at St. Peter's Konem, where I attained a mini grade of C-. In 2016, when I was to join a college in September, by bad luck, I lost my dad, who was our sole breadwinner. In short, he was our A to Z in the family. The death of my dad dealt a heavy blow in the family, because he was our everything. My mom could not continue to pay my school fees, because I was having my younger sisters who was also at school. So I could not put that much burden. He must take me to college. At least we'll have to support the younger siblings to even reach the level I was. The situation got so hard and this drove me to work in a rice farm where I was being paid 100 shillings, which could not even put a food on table, could not even pay my school fees. In 2017 April, I met a friend of mine who told me about the Dream Innovation Challenge. I liked the program and I applied. They registered me. By good luck, they paid my college fee. I was trained for 3 months. I took a course of my choice. That one is a motor vehicle mechanics, which I'm very sure most girls doesn't like, but it was my choice. Yeah. Beside being trained in motor vehicle mechanics, I was also taught life skill, communication skills in the school. Thereafter, they took me for an internship in the same county, Kisumu, in Mattox garage, which is located near Gakan. In the internship, we are doing work, but being not paid, but I remained humbled because I knew at the end of that, I could get something great. I was there for an internship for 3 months. Thereafter, the boss of the garage offered me a job as a full mechanic in the garage, whereby, thank you. The boss offered me with a job there. I worked and I was being paid sometimes 500, sometimes 800, which aids me to satisfy my needs, satisfy the needs of my mom, and even help my mom pay my younger sister's school fee. And this also prevents me from getting involved in such activities that could risk my life and get infected with HIV and AIDS. Because you see, when you are busy, your mind is busy. You don't have a room for an evil thought. You just think of working. I find it great within me. Luckily enough, not to stop there, in this year, September, I applied through online for Toyota Kenya advised of a training. I applied. And out of the 900 who applied, I was selected one of the 14 individuals to join Toyota Kenya Academy to partake a course of advanced motor vehicle mechanics. I study part-time. Thank you. I study part-time, and the rest of my time, I go to job. That I mean, in every 2 months, I go to class 1 week, and the rest of the time, I go to my job. I thank the dreams because they have made me visible. If it were not for the dreams, the Toyota could not have identified me from the village. It's because of the dreams the Toyota people identified me. The dreams have made me self-independent. I can satisfy my need by my own. I can pay the fees of my younger sisters. They can also go to school. I thank dreams. I salute to all the donors. May God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you. Power in educating women and young women. I next will ask Jane to come and tell us about an entirely different angle to ensuring girls get truth in justice.
Thank you. It's terrible to have to follow Sheila and Rebecca, but it's so wonderful for me to hear them because they also remind me of the hundreds and hundreds of young people that we have worked with too and who have benefited from DREAMS programs and our platform of the public library in Zambia. And everybody's story is different, so hopefully you'll get to hear more stories in the future as well. So our organization is a professional library development organization that is focused on building the capacity of librarians, public librarians in Africa, to address important issues. And when we saw the DREAMS challenge, when we saw that opportunity came out to address perhaps the most important issue in the society we were working in Zambia, fighting the unexpected rising of the HIV infection rate of adolescent girls after all of the years of PEPFAR's work that had pushed that infection rate in the other direction. We knew these girls, and we knew what problems they faced and what were some of the real drivers behind those shocking statistics that had nothing to do with just pure medicine. So what our innovation was, what we proposed, was the public library. The public library is the innovation, as a platform, as a gateway to a suite of services and programs that we knew could make a difference in girls' lives. So, yes, so that is our innovation. We have several libraries in Zambia, and our project sites were limited to Lusaka. So we had two Lubito libraries, and then one community center that's the site of a future Lubito library whose construction is about to begin thanks to the USAID's American Schools and Hospitals Abroad program. So, not coincidentally, our different programmatic areas are those that reflect the areas that really make a successful library, a good collection of resources, effective programming and outreach. And so, as you all might be expecting of a library, we provided confidential access to a wide range of unbiased and high-quality resources, both print and digital, and on sexual reproductive health and HIV prevention, as well as stories about female leaders around the world and various things that we could provide not only through materials but also by visits from female leaders in various fields. We provided a comprehensive secondary school scholarships as well. And as Rita said in Uganda, that is a real limitation, and that's one that needs to be overcome. Our Dreams Grant allowed us to pay for the first year of schooling, of secondary schooling for 53 girls, but the second year, our organization itself raised the funds through crowdfunding, and our Dreams Grant has ended, but the scholarships will continue to see the girls all the way through secondary school. And that's really one of the important facts about it. And our innovation is a permanent institution. So we've already raised the funds to pay for the girls' third year of school, which will begin in January. Thank you. The other areas, though, are programming that libraries are expert at, and maybe some of you didn't know that, but if you think about your own public library and the programs that happen there all the time in this country, you'll see that libraries always partner with community institutions, and they know how to offer programs and publicize them in the community and get programs that are meeting needs that they identify in the community. So our mentoring program has been key to a large part to the success in helping girls understand what they can do in the world and to be guided and led and inspired by leaders. So some of the mentoring was done by our own staff that did in-library talks with delivering a reproductive health curriculum and a gender-based equity and sexual health program. But a lot of the mentoring was done by either leaders coming to, speakers coming and speaking in the libraries, or taking the girls on field trips. And 888 attended these field trips and career talks with a bus that we were able to get under the project, and we will continue to use to be able to expand the horizons of girls and boys in the future as well. Many of the girls just sort of naturally, after they completed a mentoring program, wanted to come back and repeat it, and most of those girls became peer leaders. And a large number of girls actually did that and have gone back to their villages and to other places around and shared their knowledge on things like setting goals and various things that help raise their self-esteem. We have a family literacy program that, again, was started under our Dreams grant, but will continue. And it's to help young mothers develop foundational skills. And while they are doing that at our libraries, we have simultaneous early childhood programming to care for their children so that they can go and learn and develop themselves, and their children can profit as well. The other thing about the library is, as I mentioned, libraries work with partners. It was a natural for us to be working with partners in the community, both other Dreams partners who came and offered HIV prevention programs or sexual and reproductive health programs in the libraries, as well as other community partners that were not Dreams grantees, but also had things to contribute in that area. And I think we were able to extend the reach of the Dreams grant through that way. We had a number of HIV testing and counseling sessions that reached a lot of young people on site over the period of the 2 years. And the thing that I think shows the impact of our particular innovation, the platform of the library, is that we have 100% of the HIV testing and counseling referrals were completed. And that is not a common statistic. The folks from PEPFAR will tell you. And it's because, because we were able to bring on another Dreams partner, Lat Kings, and girls would come in and they would be mentored, and they would sign up the forms to go for counseling and testing, and they would walk outside the library and there would be the testing counselors. So it's not magic. It's just, it really shows just the power of an institution that is there that can organize these things. And finally, I mentioned that outreach was an important factor, an important part of what libraries do, and we conducted lots of outreach programs, and that's what, and community mobilization events at the libraries, including film screenings and drama performances, bringing in some of the other programming that we have in our libraries. So of the lessons learned, there were some challenges. We're not your standard public health organization. Libraries, public libraries are free and open to everyone. And so we weren't used to, as open, inclusive spaces, we weren't used to excluding people, offering programs that only target a specific group and having to tell others that, they can't participate. So we've never, been able to have to restrict programs by age or gender. And the gender exclusion generated some resentment among boys. But we were able to overcome those challenges by having other programs, by having community volunteers. Our organizations have something like 70 volunteers in Zambia, people in the community that simply want to come and get involved. And so we did find ways for those young people, and will continue to in the future. I mean, it's a problem if something you do is seen as so valuable that everyone wants it, and we don't need to make that a problem. We had a problem ensuring consistent attendance to some of the educational programs that were, you needed to complete a whole course under Dreams to show that you have, gained this knowledge. And so what we did with that, because people can come to our libraries or not, they weren't used to being told that they had to come, like you have to come to school. And so what we did is we introduced makeup sessions and gave girls multiple chances to attend the mandatory sessions. One other challenge is that something we have to admit to ourselves, we still have a long way to go to get among public health partners, to get them to really understand how libraries are a valuable platform. I hope all of you can help us with that, and that through time those perceptions will change. We did not have a challenge at all in identifying programmatic partners once the organizations understood what we were doing. So we just have to keep telling the story and showing them. And we did have a little trouble fitting into referral systems that were already overburdened by a large number of public health partners working under Dreams. But that, again, is perhaps a good problem. Certainly, that will be something that I assume will even out in the future as well. But our successes and our strengths. Again, the public, what we knew and we were happy to show people, I think, is that the public library is a well-known and trusted institution. It's not a school and it's not a clinic. And it's a place that young people have just come to, they want to be there for a wide variety of reasons. And they know that they can trust the adults that they encounter there who are helping them in a wide variety of ways, and including programming. And we have drama programming and art programming and all kinds of things. We have 3 times a week story time, deaf story time, a sign language story time. We make a particular effort to reach out to to disadvantaged children, and we are reaching people who are out of school. And we have found that that's a particular area for partnership, that we've met a number of research partners, for example, who want to do research, and it's very often trying to reach this cohort that isn't in school and isn't going to be going to a clinic, and we can help them and we can connect them and become a research platform. We didn't see, because of the short length of this project, we didn't see a lot of major research partners able to initiate a research project through our libraries in the course of the project, but because they already had plans going on with their research projects, but a number have expressed interest in doing that in the future. So that will be a longer-term outcome, I think. But it's really important to just sort of understand that in that environment, this is a new institution that just didn't exist, and it gives lots of opportunities all around. The other thing is that our libraries are very responsive and flexible according to individual needs. And so, for example, our scholarships were based on financial need, not academic merit. And what we've seen over the years is that there are lots of organizations that will offer scholarships, usually for just a specific period of time, and they very often want to take the people who have the potential for performing very strongly academically. And some of our scholarship recipients did very poorly at first. They just weren't prepared to be in school and do well. So what we were able to do to adjust to them and their individual needs is to introduce tutoring in the libraries, homework help, new resources like curriculum DVDs from the government, from the Ministry of Education, past exam papers. Those were things that we knew that they needed to help get them through. I guess the most important thing about our innovation is that it will extend beyond the end of DREAMS and will continue. We've recently received a grant from one of the DREAMS partners that was mentioned earlier, VIV, to be able to, which will help us bring our programs down to a rural library in the southern province to help fight early marriage, and we'll be using things like maker spaces and other things to help girls and their mothers gain skills. I guess that's the essence of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you very much. Let's appreciate our very determined and resilient and empowered ambassadors who joined us this morning and shared. Let's also appreciate the attentive audience, all of you, and the staff here who really are mentoring and preserving a safe space for the young women. Let us all appreciate ourselves with another round of applause. So we've gotten to the space that is generally the most satisfying and affirming for all of us, and that is the space where we get to ask each of the panelists to say a few more words on areas that are of particular importance to us. So I want to acknowledge that there are those of us here present with us and those who are listening online, that this is the time for you to send us your questions. As you think about your questions, I'm going to ask a couple of the panelists to comment on a few. Just one for World Vision. I'd like to ask the World Vision staff to say a little bit more about how your Stay in School committee structure hangs together and stay motivated and courageous enough to do what they do. If you could comment on that, please. And then to ACWIT, I'd like to ask of them an explanation of how the legal and regulatory framework in which they operate, for example, the discussion around minimum wage, that hinders the results that we all seek. I would like a comment on how the project addresses those. So a question for each as you put your questions together. World Vision? And please, we want brief questions that are to the point, and we want from our panelists brief responses that are equally to the point.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Responding to how the Stay in School Committee hangs in together and is motivated to continuously support the adolescent girls. First and foremost, the way they are selected. The individuals selected are selected because of their commitment to support adolescent girls' education. We draw the adults from the faith leaders, the exemplary teachers, the old boys and girls who are willing to serve, and representatives from the Parents Teachers Association and the boards of governors who are all interested in ensuring that the girls succeed.
Thank you.
And the adolescent girls are selected by their peers because of their ability to transfer knowledge, the way they are exemplary to them, and how they are responsive to their needs and willing to share information with them and build their capacity. So the interest is number one that keeps them together, and their willingness to support. But also they have monthly meetings that keeps them checking with each other how things are going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to add anything to that, Rebecca?
No.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. ACWIT, would you care to comment on dealing with legal framework?
Yes, so this has been work in progress, and it's a balance between getting the girls the jobs and also the sizes of the employers. Sometimes they are really small, but I know that this is work that they're doing. They're getting big on it by working with the Federation of the Kenya Employers. Continued advocacy, because it's a nationwide problem at whichever levels. And I know that in the new they have a new project like Dreams that has been funded by Motorola, and this is one of the areas that ACWIT wants to expound on, and it hadn't been really factored into this project being a short project, but it's an area that is a gap, and they're gonna go wide on that.
Thank you, Judy. Yeah. Questions from the audience? I'd take two at a time. Okay, I see two hands there. Remember, to the point, please. The gentleman in the back in the purple.
Oh, you have a microphone even. Oh, very well. Hi, I'm Justin Fugel with Plan International. Thank you for this interesting program. The program is very holistic, but I haven't heard much about early forced and child marriage, and I wondered, do you have components of the programs that work on preventing child marriage specifically?
Let's take the second before the panelists respond.
Building off of Justin's question, my name is Suzanne Petroni. I have a consultancy called Gender Equality Solutions. So for ACWID in particular, I'm curious, you mentioned as one of the challenges you face motherhood, but is marriage also a challenge for getting girls to enroll in the program and then to stay in it? And I ask that in terms of whether girls are concerned that working will inhibit their chances of finding a good husband, or if the husbands are not supportive of the girls working. And then very quickly, a second question for World Vision. It's great that you're using the adolescent girls themselves as the early warning system. Curious as to whether they're compensated for their work and their time, both to help recruit and work with the girls at risk and to create support groups to keep other girls in school.
Okay, let's ask our panelists to respond. And Rebecca, you are a part of the response for SAGE as well. Okay, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding working with adolescent girls, as to whether we compensate them for their time, we work with them because they are part of the school system and they work within the school environment mostly. And for the activities that are outside the school, except when they're in their own community, they refer to the adult stay in school committee members to follow up those girls that have dropped out of school or have issues that need to be followed up, because we do not want them usually to miss school and go out and do work in the community when it is school time. They only do that when they are within their own community. We do not pay them. One, because we know it is not sustainable. If we start paying them when the program stops and it is associated with cash, the likeliness of them stopping to do this good work will be high. And we don't want this program to stop with the funding.
Okay, early marriage?
Issues to do with early marriage are actually handled within the Dreams SAGE program. We just did not speak about the comprehensive nature in which the SAGE model is. But we have a whole training package on ending violence against children. And that covers child marriage, that covers forced marriage, and other forms of violence. And we train teachers, we train school administrators, we train the peer educators themselves, and we work with a range of stakeholders that are actually dealing with issues to do with forced and child marriages.
Excellent, thank you.
So for marriage, whether it's a factor in completion in the training, as I mentioned before about the GBV is both at home and at employment level. So, and it's not only physical. So we've seen cases where the girls are enrolled, but they can't complete because of the conflict at home. So, and this is where now ACWID comes in to intervene. And this has been successful. The same case as earning. When you start earning, it also sometimes it causes this conflict at home. And again, ACWID is working with the specific case by case. About early and child marriage, ACWID is not having any program specific to this because the niche is ICT and digital literacy. But what they are learning is the need to be broader, not narrowed down, because the girls they are working with are affected by many more things, and there's need to contextualize not just the girl, but also the family interventions, and also the community and the society. So they need to broaden out and work with the likes of World Vision.
And their responses as well to provide childcare for young women who are mothering
Yes, when there's nobody to take care of the child, they are able to come to the center because it's for 3 months, and also 3 months internship to take the institutions have been able to take care of those girls, but not all of them. Some of them, they have mothers to take care of the children. So it's on need basis as well.
Thank you. Jane?
The mentoring programs that we have, and I think probably all of the mentoring kinds of activities that all of the Dreams organizations have that are aimed at raising self-esteem and just helping girls envision a future are, we feel something that militates against early marriage at least in terms of the girl's own perceptions. Forced marriage is a very different thing, and I think requires a lot of advocacy. And certainly, we have seen that problem much more in rural areas than we do in Lusaka, in the capital city. And that's why I mentioned that we have a project following on to particularly fight against early and forced marriage. There are laws against marriage. I can't remember the age, but I believe it's 16, under 16 in Zambia. It's illegal with the national laws to force a girl to be married. But there's a different legal system there, which is the traditional. Under traditional authorities, girls are even expected to marry at a much younger age. And it's those traditional authorities that we work with in the rural areas. And we've had events where we've brought them to the libraries, and we've talked very explicitly about the rights that we are fighting for on behalf of all of the young people we serve, but particularly the girls who are victimized by that in a much worse, particularly in the rural areas.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions from the audience? I recognize the woman in the purple sweater. And there's another hand, a gentleman with the glasses there in the suit.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Groenendaal. I work with USAID, and about a decade ago, I did a program evaluation for a pilot program in Kisumu that was doing something your project, Judy, is very similar to. They were training young women on vocations, and the 3 vocations they had chosen were actually very saturated in the community. So even after the women were coming out of the training program, they couldn't find jobs. So I'm very excited to see that you've done a community assessment of jobs that are still in need. And I was hoping you would talk just a little bit more about how you're doing that and if it's expanding into other vocations that are more technological based, getting more onto the computer systems, or medically based, kind of what the future for jobs are for the young women in the area.
And a second question?
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Mkoyo, Chairperson, Uganda AIDS Commission. I'm particularly happy to be here today. First of all, to thank the US people who are supporting the DREAMS programs in the respective countries. I've seen it in Uganda in my various work and movement in the various regional accountability forums. And the testimonies are excellent. There's something they didn't talk about today that's empowering the young women. You know, adolescent girls and young women are the most at risk in Uganda. And I've noted what we've already seen, putting girls in school and making them empowered, but also those that cannot make it to school. I've seen young women being supported to become, to develop innovative, self-sustaining projects that supports them to come up, income-generating activities that are supporting them. And we as government, we are looking at how best to scale DREAMS activities across the country, because it brings all these outcomes that are wonderful. They bring a smiling face on our young girls and women, but also ensure that people don't get HIV/AIDS. Those that have HIV/AIDS are really kept on treatment. Those that are not HIV positive, then we make sure that they remain negative. So thank you very much, all those that are supporting this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, a reminder that these programs then fall into your lap for sustaining in country. Thank you for that. A second question from our Twitter audience for Sheila and Rebecca. What effects have you noticed your success has had on your community, especially your peers and your older members? So, what have you noticed in terms of the impact of your success on your community, especially your peers and those who are older?
Thank you very much. Answering the question, my success, like going back to school and completing my education, like secondary level, has inspired my peers, because those days before, they knew that when you drop out of school and the next thing is marriage. And maybe after marriage, children will come and responsibility will come, and the next thing is poverty and suffering. But when I get back to school, missing 2 terms and becoming the top of my class inspired them a lot. And those who drop out of school, the few actually who dropped out of school, they don't get married very fast. And parents have learned not to marry their daughters off when there is no money for school fees. As a peer educator at school, dreams taught me how to be a role model, actually, to behave well, to be exemplary to the rest of the students, which has helped a lot to improve on the discipline in school. Because if I'm teaching the peers to be disciplined, me myself, I'm disciplined. If I'm forming group discussions with them, they know I'm a brilliant girl, like forming group discussions with them. Not like, this girl is also forming group discussion. Yes, she's the last in class. No. If I'm advising them, like, to have good behaviors, me myself, I have good behaviors. And my success has helped a lot in improving discipline in school, and also inspiring them to aim higher than before, and also to change their mindset in my community, not to marry their daughters off when there is no money for school fees, but to aim higher and work hard, like teaching them life skills, teaching them other small work like baking, knitting, and the rest to earn a living and other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sheila?
Thank you very much. The effect that the dreams giving me job that have inspired me much is that they have given me job. They have prevented my mind from being idle. As you know very well, an idle mind is a palace for every evil thoughts. So I have no that time of involving myself in risk activity. And also, they have made me self-independent. And even in the family, I can proudly say I am my mom number 1 to my mom. Though I'm the 8th child, but I appear number 1 to her. Because the other siblings, I'm number 8. The remaining ones got married in an early age. So I was the one being looked at the next. After you are Form 4, you need to get married. But that was not my portion. My portion is of success. Thank you.
Thank you. Employability needs assessment.
Okay, so what ACWIT is doing is that they do a rapid labor market survey, and the intention is to find out how many employers are in that county and in what trades. Then once they establish that, they call for employers roundtable meetings. And we have another grantee in Kisumu, for example. So what they did is a joint employers roundtable, for efficiency. So in this employers meeting, they are able to identify what are the skills gaps, and not only the skills, what are the issues with the employees that they are having, especially the young ones. one of the employers is called Somerset. It's an ICT and digital trade. And one of the gap, for example, was coding. They didn't have enough staff to do the coding. And once they get staff, they don't stay for long. They move on to other things. So there was the retention component. So ACWIT has a large cohort on ICT and coding, not only in DREAMS, also in other projects, because they're also running other projects. And they purpose to focus on what that employer wants. And also for the retention, they do a lot of employability, including the mentorship, also the behavioral component. So that's how they are doing it.
Thank you.
And also for the DREAMS core, we have the larger DREAMS program has a database of girls that need to go into these VTIs, and they have not been doing this previously. So when ACWIT calls for applications, they actually target those IPs that are doing the DREAMS, the implementing partners for the DREAMS, the big DREAMS, the larger program, and they are actually able to vet the specific girls from their DREAMS database that are suitable for these courses. And this has worked very well because about 15% of the girls that are graduating and getting employed are from the larger DREAMS program, who have already been vetted by the DREAMS, the programs themselves. So this works.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you very much. I recognize a question here. The woman up front. I haven't been looking at the people in front, so may I ask for this woman in the purple sweater and this woman on the end in the black and blue.
Thank you very much. My name is Janet Fleischman with the CSIS Global Health Policy Center. And it's really wonderful to hear about the programs, and particularly from Rebecca and Sheila about some of your own experiences here. So I have two quick questions. One to Rebecca and Sheila. You've talked a lot about the problem of girls getting pregnant and dropping out. But there wasn't a lot of talk about access to information and services on family planning. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of that in your communities for girls to be able to stay in school, to be able to access these economic opportunities? So the linkages between economic empowerment and education for girls and access to family planning and women's health services. And then the second question is about sustainability of the program. Because we understand that the Innovation Challenge has ended in some cases or is ending soon. So how do you see this going forward to be something that can be sustained and scaled up?
Thank you.
I'm Janine Carmichael from FHI 360. I was also going to ask about program sustainability, but I'll add a slight spin on that, which is to direct the question toward Rebecca and Sheila, and to ask you what you think you and your peers need going forward in order to sustain the successes that you've had under these projects.
Thank you. Would you like to start off on the last? What do you think?
Okay, thank you. About the family planning, when you were being trained at the college, you were taught all these, but it was of your choice. You were taught different ways of family planning, the use of condoms, but specifically the individuals, you were taught to choose that one of your choice that you would like. Thank you.
And what do you need to sustain your successes? Do I interpret that?
Sustain my success, as per me, is hard work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because with me, I work in the field of men-dominated field. But if not hard work and courage, you cannot manage. It is hard work that involves. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Thank you very much for that question. Concerning family planning, because for us we're in-school girls, but as I said before, that other girls, they have asexual feelings, so they cannot abstain. So we advocate for the use of condoms, and we request that the school should avail it to the school nurse so that these girls can use. Because I think apart from abstinence, use of condom is the best for in-school girls. Thank you.
Sage, could you add a response there? Do you make referrals for family planning?
Thank you very much. Regarding family planning for the in-school, there is a policy, especially from Ministry of Education and Sports, that family planning shouldn't be accessed in school. And so the girls are referred for family planning services outside the school with the nearest facilities that are next to the schools, so that they can be counseled and guided and they can make their choices.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah, for ACWID on family planning, they're working with other dreams, the larger dreams program, and also bar hostess for PrEP. So they actually bring bar hostess to talk about PrEP and also other projects, so that the girl has options where to go and get these services as needed.
Dabutu, any comments on that?
Basically, yeah, we do all of those same, and they will be sustained and will continue to be sustained through any partners that can continue to offer these programs. We certainly stay with girls and boys long beyond graduation from high school. We are with them. We simply are with them. It is sustained. There's no end.
I think maybe the issue of sustainability from Sage as well as ACWID, if you could comment on that as well.
Okay. Regarding sustainability, the SAGE Dreams Project is working with the Ministry of Education and Sports to develop a policy guideline on the early warning system, so that it is a system that is used eventually across the schools, because we've seen that it helps with identifying girls at risk, but also preventing school dropout. And we are working also closely with the Ministry of Health in Uganda to make sure that health education, especially on HIV prevention and friendly reproductive health education, continues beyond the project, because the girls need information to make the right choices and to remain in school and HIV free.
Yeah, for ACWID, apart from the new project that they have won to continue with some of the dreams work and improve the programming in terms of the challenges that they have faced, to also expand the lessons that they have learned, the curriculum, the skill-based curriculum, which is 3 months, has been adopted by the government. Actually, there was a launch that was done 2 months ago. So the government institutions are going to be offering these courses, and this will make it more affordable for the girls to join the colleges and complete at a wider scale. So those are the 2 things I can think about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Judy. I think we've seen examples of movement forward in terms of the adoption of some of the models that have been tested by government and by the community at large. And this is, in fact, what we were hoping the Innovation Challenge would be able to do: open doors to opportunity. And we're seeing that demonstrated in the 3 programs that were presented here. We want to say thank you to our presenters, to our ambassadors, and to all of you for participating in this discussion. I would like to invite our representative from World Vision, Dorothy please, would you come up and just issue some closing remarks?
How do
do I follow all of that? Because it was wonderful. I'm so happy to meet Rebecca. Okay, Rebecca's our little friend here. She is famous in World Vision now because of that video that you saw earlier. Okay, it's been showed to our boards of directors, and everybody knows Rebecca. So it's really wonderful to meet you in person. I really just get to say thank you for what an awesome job you all did to present and to talk about these 3 different programming types, all very different, but all really looking at issues of adolescence. On your way out, there's a paper out there. I'm going to do a little PR for World Vision. It's a 2-pager on adolescence. And I was reading through that as I was listening to the conversations, and the statistics are startling, actually. And so one of my colleagues wrote this blurb. She said, there's never been a population bulge of this proportion among adolescents globally than there is now. About 1.2 billion people, or 1/5 the world's population, fits in this age range of 10 to 19. Okay, so what we're doing is important. It's important to pay attention to this group. And I liked what somebody said, and I forgot which speaker it was, that we're not focusing on the problems of adolescence, but the opportunities and the potential. And that's what we've heard today from all of our guests. So I just want to say thank you to each person who's been up here, our esteemed panelists, and for your presentations. Thanks to the Wilson Center for hosting us. There's a lot of work that goes into these kind of events, and so we really, really appreciate that. For PEPFAR, for the DREAMS team at PEPFAR that is funding us to do this work, to JSI, to ACWIC, and to Lubuto Libraries, which I'm very intrigued by what you're doing. I think it's really interesting approach. So thank you to everybody and for all the participants that have come today and for supporting adolescents, okay, and for supporting the young people. And if I come to Kenya, I'm going to come to your mechanic shop to get my car worked on, okay? How's that, Sheila? That was an awesome story. So thank you to everybody, okay?
Thank you.
Oh.
And somebody's